Hi everyone. Um, so as discussed in the last class, today we will be having a shorter class followed by your fourth quiz. We'll just discuss a couple of points which remained in this topic of millimeter wave communications. And I would rather not want to start a new topic before your midsem, but let me give you just a bit of sneak peek into the topic that is going to come over the next few classes after the midsem. Okay, but we will not go into details of that. Rather, we will do the quiz today. If you remember, we had ended up. Can somebody recall what we had ended up with in the previous class?
So regarding the previous class, I had a doubt as well.
Yeah, please.
So in the previous class, we were covering multi-rat network.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain a bit how, what is multi-rat? You
So
mentioned
this is this is
previously.
something which we had not started discussing. We had just briefly
Yes.
given an idea about it, right? So RAT stands for radio access technique, right? So this RAT stands for radio access technique, right? The only thing that you need to focus on here is the access part, because technique is nothing but, and radio refers to the the frequencies that we are going to use are classically of radio frequency spectrum, but RAT, radio access technique, encompasses is an umbrella term for all possible ways to access your channel. So what are access networks? It's how your user equipment connects to the nearest let's say access point that is providing it the internet. So what are the possible ways that you can connect to your nearest let's say access point? One would be to use your cellular services. So cellular radio access technique. You can always have a Wi-Fi. You can have light fidelity. You can have other possible options like this as well, right? So inside cellular there can be multiple rats. One, as I was mentioning, you can have sub 6 gigahertz transmissions. So although it's simply to specify different bands of operation, but since the functionality and the hardware requirements of sub 6 gigahertz transmissions is considerably different from millimeter wave transmissions. You need a different kind of antenna, different kind of power amplifier, a different, let's say, engineering challenges are associated with a millimeter wave transmission as compared to sub 6 gigahertz transmission. So it can be thought of as a different access technique. So it means that if you can connect, if you consider your today's cellular handsets, you can always connect to your IEEE standard Wi-Fi access point and also 3GPP standard cellular access point, right? So you can think about an additional receiver or transceiver inside your mobile device, which can operate in millimeter wave frequencies. So that can be thought about as an different access point. Now, multi-rat refers to all of these operating simultaneously. So, multi-rat can be, for example, if I do not go into details of this millimeter wave, but let me give you an example from a different perspective, right? Suppose you are located inside, let's say, a home, right? So, suppose this is a home and you are located inside this, the user equipment is located inside this, right? And the nearest base station, right, is connecting and giving you indoor cellular coverage. And as compared to that, we would like to probably explore another system which has an antenna on top of it, which receives the signal from the outdoor located cellular base station and transmits it or conveys it via a let's say a Li-Fi access point, which means you have an LED which gives you access indoor, right? Which means that this user, in case it receives a greater signal from this nearest base station, which might happen if that base station is closely located to your home, it connects to this radio access technique. On the other hand, when the base station is located very far, it can happen that this outdoor to indoor penetration loss is so high that inside you are not getting a good, let's say, signal. So basically, there is an outdoor located antenna which relays your information via some other, let's say, technique. It can be a Li-Fi, it can also be a simple relay. In case of a relay, it will not be a different radio access technique, because it's the same radio access technique, with a different, let's say, repeater brought in front of the user. But in case it is using some other technology to provide you this internet access, you can think about this device to be operating in multi-rat. Right? Is this point clear? What multi-rat is? Was this the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what basically we will be studying about are, I mean, we will not start it today, but probably after the midsem, what we will be going into are base stations which operate in multiple bands, or basically base stations which have their sub 6 gigahertz mode of operation and their millimeter wave mode of operation. And we will say that they are multi-rat base stations. So they are multi-rat base stations. But even though I say this, remember that we are talking about sub 6 gigahertz and uh, millimeter wave base stations operating together, or you can assume them to be co-located. But by no means multi-rat means only these two. It can be any possible out of several possible options. Okay.
Sir,
Any other doubt? Yes.
a Wi-Fi system,
Yeah.
it also have we have modems which operates in 5 and I think 2.4 gigahertz to different bands
Mm-hmm.
can connect to anyone. That's also an example of this type of multi-rat system.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So for the moment, it is the, I mean, your commercially available users. I mean, it's up to the user to decide which rat you want to select, right? So for example, you either connect to your nearest Wi-Fi access point, put in a password, and then start using the internet. Or in case you do not have a wireless, I mean, Wi-Fi router nearby you, you switch back to your cellular services. Or in case both are available, you just select the one which is giving you the better service. I mean, you just connect to the cellular, I mean 4G signals if they are good enough to do your, let's say, streaming services or whatever. You use it. Otherwise, you switch to a available, let's say, Wi-Fi access point. In case I mean, everything depends on the performance of each of them, and it's up to the user which one you want to select. The operators are also different. For example, if you can come to our campus, we pay for the internet and provide you the wireless services. But in case the wireless services are not there, I mean Wi-Fi services are not there, which means you go, I mean, little bit outdoors, you just go back to your 4G system, right? The operators are different, as well as the pricing and the management is also different, right? You do not pay the same person for your 4G as you do for the Wi-Fi access, right? But these things will become more and more seamless as far as the user is concerned. The user would be a bit rat agnostic uh, internet service user, right? So which means what? It means it's up to the network to optimize the services for the user. You can seamlessly I mean, start download or start streaming a movie and move inside and outside a house, inside a building, move outdoors, start moving in a vehicle, and so on. It's up to the network operator for you to switch between these available sub-6 gigahertz millimeter wave band. And in case, I mean, there are a lot of things. If you go into this discussion, there are a lot of things that we need to have. So one point that you had brought up is a very specific example, and it's a very important one, which is to say that Wi-Fi operates at a frequency which is near to 2.3, 2.4 gigahertz, right? There are other bands as well, but these are more interesting bands because these are the bands which are mostly prevalent, and they are, I mean, they are characterized by more high speed access. So what would happen is that cellular network operators would also sometimes opportunistically use these bands. So which comes under the umbrella of something called unlicensed access. So these bands, this 3.4, sorry, 2.4, and several other spectrum alongside it are open for these kind of are open for usage without licensing. So that's why your Wi-Fi access points can use it. By the way, coincidentally, your microwave oven also uses a similar frequency. So if you have I mean, if you are streaming a video and you put your mobile phone on top of your microwave and you start, I mean, if it's an old one, especially which is leaking some radiation. So if you start your microwave to heat some food, you would see that some interruption in your services of Wi-Fi. So these bands are unlicensed in the sense that you do not. I mean, none of the operators had paid for using these bands, but they are regulated in the sense that nobody can start transmitting in this band randomly. Okay, um, but this is a discussion for another day. Why there is this variant of cellular access, which, I mean, if you are interested, you can look up this term called LTE, unlicensed, and I mean, read through it. Okay. Um, But coming back to our discussion, as we move on to 5G and 5G beyond networks, and possibly in future 6G networks, you would have a more seamless experience, in the sense that it will not be you who would be deciding in, I mean, which rack to select, but it will be optimized for you, and you would be provided a joint pricing for both of them. Any other points in this regard?
No, sir.
Okay. Although this might not be related, but this brings me to I mean, a somewhat, let's say, uh, I mean, somewhat significant point, which is the concept of network slicing, which was initially scheduled, I mean, initially a part of the syllabus of this course, but there will be very few components at the end. Has anyone heard about this term called network slicing? Yes, no? Okay. Yeah, if not, then we can come back to it at the end of the course. But briefly speaking, what network slicing means, and it is a very core 5G technology. Although we will not be covering it because it's not that interesting for us from the perspective of stochastic geometry, specifically because it doesn't concern so much the access network, but it concerns more about the core network and its infrastructure and resources. What network slicing means, that on top of a common physical architecture or common physical infrastructure, so let me write it down. So on top of a common physical infrastructure. So what is a physical infrastructure? It can consist of computing, storage, communication, resources. So you can think about applications such as AR, VR, or let's say autonomous driving and so on. So it needs a lot of communication resources. It needs a lot of computing resources, somewhat some storage resources, but not all of them are present in the end device, right? So for example, you are running a, let's say, real-time application. You need to offload some of your computation to nearby servers and so on. So what a service provider does, sorry, what a network operator does is, on top of a common physical infrastructure, which means all the collection of its resources like computing, storage, and communication, a network operator creates virtual instances of networks called slices to cater to specific QoS requirements of the users. Okay, what does this mean? Do you remember in the very first class of our course, I had talked about three different flavors of 5G? Does anyone recall what these flavors of 5G were?
So low latency and
Yeah, the one was
BGP,
uh,
URLC.
uh, URLLC, so which is ultra reliable low latency communications for applications such as remote surgery, telesurgery, critical control, vehicle to vehicle communication, autonomous driving, and so on. The other one was EMBB, which was called Enhanced Mobile Broadband, which is your classical high-speed internet services, such as video downloading, streaming, let's say holographic communication if it comes, and so on. The other was MMTC or Massive IoT, which is connecting a lot of devices. There is a large density of devices needed to be connected, but not so much constraint on the requirements of data rate or reliability or latency. It's like your agricultural IoT networks, or for example, industrial IoT networks, and so on. An application can be characterized in terms of multiple of these possibilities. So, for example, these industrial IoT networks can be categorized as MMTC as well as URLLC, because you need some kind of it's a real-time control of these agents working on the factory floor, but also you need to connect to a lot of devices at the same time, right? So these are the initial three flavors of 5G, and the network operators are envisaging to um, offer their 5G services categorized into these three slices. So these are the, example three slices of initial 5G offerings. So in case you come across a news article which says that, okay, this network provider, or let's say network operator or service provider has started its 5G networks, do not get really carried away with it, because a complete commercial 5G network comprises of an offering of all three possibilities to cater to all possible users. So in case a network operator is advertising, let's say, certain Gbps of download speed, it doesn't mean that it is fully 5G operational network. Okay. So initial 5G offerings will be create when the network operators would be creating three types of slices, and each slice would be categorized or will be characterized according to its QoS requirements. Which means if a user comes into the network and it connects to its nearest base station, it will send a packet containing some information about its QoS requirements. What does QoS mean? QoS stands for quality of service. Right? So suppose this user is trying to download some video. So its quality of service is categorized by its requirement of data rate, its requirement of signal coverage, its requirement of packet drops, packet error rates. It's there are other parameters like jitter and so on. So this is a let's say a vector of requirements that is specifically related to the service that this user is asking for. So for example, the service might be this video download. According to that request which this user sends to this network, the base station will connect the user to one of its slice. Or to put it in another way, the user will connect to the base station and the base station will provision one of the slices to this user. Now, what does this slice contain? A slice mean? It means suppose you have a certain amount of resources at your hand, some communication resources, which in our terminology will be the frequencies of operations, number of channels, how much time you give it in case of a TDMA system, these kind of things. Storage in terms of certain things that this user would want to store in the cache or in the in the storage devices present in the base station and so on. Some computation resources in case this user wants to offload some kind of computation tasks to this base station, so which is which happens for an V2V kind of application, or AR VR kind of application. For a video download, however, you just need a very high communication service, which means you need a very good data rate. You do not really care too much about storage or computation resources. So so this kind of service is categorized by a QoS vector, which has a very high demand on rate and not so much on the other. So out of the total available resources at the network operator side, so these are the resources. Based on your QoS requirement, the operator will connect you to a slice which is categorized by certain fixed QoS, let's say, characteristics. So for example, if it connects to an EMBB slice, it directly means that that user would be offloaded, or that user would be provisioned certain number of channels of download. Certain number of resources of storage will be reserved for that user uh, while doing its service, and similarly for the computation power. So in this case, not so much in the storage side and not so much in the computation side, but maybe a lot of channels will be provided to that user. So when we say that there will be RAT agnostic movement or RAT agnostic service provided to the users, it also means that these things will be automated. So for example, if you want to make a voice call which does not need so much of data rate, but probably needs some degree of reliability, the operator will itself decide that you should be connecting to sub 6 gigahertz RAT, because I will be connecting you to a certain, let's say, reliable slice which is categorized by certain channels of sub 6 gigahertz RAT. On the other hand, if you are located very near to the user and you are demanding a very, let's say, high definition video on streaming, it's the operator who will be deciding that I will connect to an EMBB slice where I will be provisioning you millimeter wave RAT, and I will be providing certain number of channels to you to sustain your service. What you should be concerned about is what is your QoS requirement and whether it is getting satisfied by my service or not. Is this concept, as a concept, is it clear, this argument?
Sir, basically, it's
Mhm.
cloud computing applied to network services, right?
Right. It goes a bit beyond cloud computing, because these resources which I am talking about, they might be anywhere. So they can be at the core, they can be at the cloud, they can be at the edge, right? So all of them, if you combine, and they together constitute what we call the physical infrastructure of this operator, and it provisions different, let's say, um, instantiations or virtualizations of the network. So it's a virtual network created just for you. You will be getting these services as if these are the resources that were reserved for you. So it's you can think about cloud computing plus plus with other resources with end to end service guarantees.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So we got distracted a bit. To come back to our discussion on multi-rat networks, we were specifically focusing on a certain type of base stations, which are able to operate in both millimeter wave and sub-6 gigahertz RAT. Um, and by the way, I remember that I had given you a small homework. Were you able to do it? Does anyone remember what it was?
Yeah, sir. Actually, the question was to there were two parts. One
Mm-hmm.
you did in the class,
Mm-hmm.
and some modification was still remained to do. And the second
Mm-hmm.
question was to find the condition on the path loss constant based on uh, which rat will give the more power.
Right. So basically, we were thinking, or we were considering the downlink received power from the sub 6 gigahertz RAT, let's say. And since we are talking about the same base station which is operating in this dual mode, our transmit power would remain the same, right? And a user which is located at a certain distance, let's call it D, and to the power minus alpha mu, and some k mu, which is the path loss constant for the sub 6 gigahertz RAT. And we were comparing it with a millimeter wave received power, which consists of some path loss constant in the millimeter wave band, the same transmit power, the same distance, however raised to a different path loss exponent, and a combined effect of transmitter and receiver antenna gain or beamforming gains, right? So we were trying to find out what would be the condition when these things are equal, right? Or let's say, what is the condition when this millimeter wave received power becomes greater than the sub-6 gigahertz received power. So why this is an important thing to characterize? Because if you talk about base stations which operate in both the bands, and it's similar to what example which I was discussing a while ago, that you connect to your 4G network operator and you come back to your Wi-Fi network and see which is giving you the better data rate or which better service, and then you choose to do your service with that uh, selected option, right? So it's something similar. So you connect to the base station which is giving you the maximum power, which means you have fixed this nearest base station, or whichever one is giving you the maximum power. Now you need to decide the rat, right? I mean, of course, the base station needs to decide the rat. A user cannot decide on its own, right? So the base station needs to have some feedback from the user side, that out of the different possible options, let's say this black one and this blue one, which will be giving you a better service. One way to determine it without the need for characterizing the other base stations is just to simply measure this downlink received power from both these channels. One is the sub-6 gigahertz channel and the other is the millimeter wave channel. So you would select probably millimeter wave rat, which is this blue one. So this is wave as compared to sub-6 gigahertz rat, in case this condition holds true. So we can say that this is the probability that you would be connecting to the millimeter wave tier, which means what is the probability that you are having a downlink received power in the millimeter wave band greater than the sub-6 gigahertz band. Okay. We'll come to this probability a bit later, but let's only focus on the argument of this probability, which is k mu d minus alpha mu to be less than g k m d minus alpha, right? Okay, so can we have an expression in terms of d only? So if we do a couple of simple steps, we would find that it is d to the power alpha m minus alpha mu, sorry, should be less than some g k m by k mu. Okay, which means d should be probably less than g k m by k mu to the power 1 by alpha m minus alpha mu, right? So if you, I don't know how many of you have looked up, has anyone looked up this 38.900? Yes, no?
Yes, sir. I tried, but I didn't get the paper you told.
Yeah, so it's not a paper, it's basically a Word document which consists of
Yeah, path loss exponent details about that for
right.
urban
So
and rural area.
you were
Yeah,
not able to find it?
I no, sir.
Okay, so let me just
No, sir. Actually, it redirected me to a page and there.
okay, so let me just stop presenting and help you search this a bit. So in case you are not able to find it in 38.900, you would be able to find it in 38.901 or 2 or something like this. So what I would like you to do is go to your browser. I hope you can see my screen, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
you just type 38.900 or probably 901 or something. So you will go to these specifications. I mean, even if you do 38.900, the first one that would pop up is this 3GPP specifications, right? There is no other, I mean, result that would appear. So if you go to one of them, it will direct you to the 3GPP let's say specification freezes. So this is probably release 14 of 3GPP, which consists of a study of channel model for frequencies from 0.5 to 100 gigahertz, right? So you need to go to versions, which means it will I mean, it will give you the list of which number of meeting and which version was frozen in that meeting. So you need to go to the probably the latest one, and it will make you download this zipped file, right? So if you go to the zip file and you open the zip file, you will get the Word document where you can search the path loss models. Okay, so I don't know if I can do this for you. So if I can copy this and go to this thing, so let me try to extract it. Okay, it has opened. So it will contain this type of a Word document. So let me try to open it as well. Yeah, so this is a study on the channel models. I don't know if this is a correct version which I have downloaded. So let me go to, yeah. It's from MM-Magic and MyWeb. By the way, this is one of the projects that I had worked on during my PhD. So let me go to path loss. Yeah. So you can see that there are different path loss, let's say, models derived in this section 7.4, line of sight probability, penetration modeling, which means what is the signal loss that you experience while going from outdoor to indoor. These kind of things are present inside this thing. Okay. So whatever we discuss, I mean, I am discussing a how do you say, a watt version of it, which means a watt version of it. So k d minus mu g, these things, if you convert into the log scale, what it would be, it will be some log of g plus log of let's say k, some minus of alpha log of d, something like this, right, in the dB scale, right? Multiplied by 20 in case you are talking about power or so on, or I don't know, multiplied by 10. So just look into these conversions. So and this is the path loss, and they, I think, prescribe it in terms of the path gain. So it's just a simple expression of when should you use which path loss model and what are the parameters that you should be using. What we are focusing on, so RMA refers to rural macro base stations, UMA refers to urban macro base station, UMI, which is we are going to study one of the models in our upcoming modules, is street canyon. It is when the propagation is along the roads of an urban area, and INH is indoor home, and these are the different path loss models for it. The only thing that I had asked you to do is to find out what are these coefficients they are using, this alpha, right? So you see that d to the power minus alpha means in this dB expansion, whatever coefficient is present in the term which contains log of d, that coefficient is actually the path loss exponent, right? So if we come back to our 3GPP document, um, it says here, for example, in non-line of sight street canyon model, you have 335 points. So this is 10 log 10. Okay, so that means 3.53 is your exponent that you should use in non-line of sight in case of an urban macro. Let's go to the macro base stations. I think they are more interesting since we have discussed them in it in a bit more detail. So urban macro in non-line of sight mode is generally around 3.9, which is similar to the 4 that we have been using. In line of sight, things become a bit more complicated, but as a rule of thumb, you can use something like 2.2 or something similar. Okay. But again, it becomes different for different distances. So it says that if the height of the antenna user terminal is within this to this, you use this model, but only up till d dash bp, which is certain distance, and the distance is calculated using some height of the antenna and height of the user terminal it's similar to a line of sight distance. 38.900 gives these things. If you want to go to a more detailed detailed discussion of the sub 6 gigahertz, I think 38 point, sorry, 36 point, let's see if there is something like this. 36.873. So if you type 36.873, it will give you to direct you to that specification, which was released 12, which is several years before this millimeter wave business came in, which was earlier 2014, and the last one was updated at 2018. And you can look at the models which are there. So this is the study of 3D channel model for LTE, which means below your millimeter wave region, which became 4G eventually and got standardized as LTE. Is it clear how to search or go about searching these things? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So these kind of most.
Yes,
So
sir.
if you
Yes, sir.
look, so most of the experiments which give rise to these channel models are carried out under the umbrella of various either European or US based projects. But 3GPP is by no means country specific. It's a consortium of many companies that are involved. So I don't know if you have looked it up. So 3GPP, or let's go to the members of 3GPP. Let's look at. So from the country's perspective or telecom union's perspective, there are these members. So there is TSDSI from India as well, but HC and ATIS, they are, let's say, the major stakeholders of 3GPP. But it's a consortium of all universities that you can think of, and all companies that you can think of, right? So your Qualcomms are there, Ericsson is there, Intel is there, Huawei is there, ZTE, everybody is there, and the universities as well. By the way, recently we IIIT Delhi became a part of TSDSI. Okay. So we are now also an official member of 3GPP indirectly. Nevertheless, we are digressing a bit. So let me come back to my discussion on the class. Okay, so in case everything is, I mean, if you are able to find out these values, right? So let me delete these things. So I would urge you to look into these specifications and find out, I mean, based on distances, how does this alpha m and alpha mu varies? It's a very key point, by the way. If you are a bit, I mean, if you are observing a bit more closely, what does this mean, right? Can you tell me what does this mean? It means if alpha m is greater than alpha mu, which means your path loss is more detrimental in millimeter wave, which it is. But if it is modeled in such a way that the exponent is higher in millimeter wave, you understand this point, right? D to the power minus alpha, the alpha, the more it is, the worse it is for the received power, right? So in case alpha m is greater than alpha mu, it means that if you come only below a certain threshold of distance, you would be receiving a higher millimeter wave received power, right? On the other hand, in case, and that is only true if gkm is greater than gk mu, right? Which means if both of these conditions are satisfied across all base stations, let's say from the typical user, there exists a distance, let's call it DC, or the critical distance, where DC is simply gkm by k mu to the power minus alpha m minus alpha mu, right? If these both conditions are satisfied, then what can you infer is, you can infer that if the base station lies outside this critical distance, you would have a larger sub-6 gigahertz received power, and if the base station is lying inside this critical distance, you would have a larger millimeter wave received power. Is this proposition okay with you, or do you not see where it is coming from?
So,
Yeah.
sir, isn't that alpha mu should always be greater than alpha m?
Sorry.
Because millimeter wave, sir, alpha mu should always be greater than alpha m, right? Because alpha mu will have more path loss exponent.
Sorry, you are
So
saying
millimeter
alpha
wave,
mu should be always greater than alpha m, right?
so millimeter wave will always have the more path loss exponent in comparison to.
That
So
means alpha m is greater than alpha mu, right?
yeah, yeah, yes, yeah,
This one.
exactly that.
Okay. So yeah, that is true in some sense, but it's not the end of the story. Okay, and that's why I would urge you to go through these documents. What if you go through these documents, you will see that there are very specific cases. Although we will not focus on those cases, there are very specific cases when this is true. And when are these things true? It happens when you are in very close proximity to your serving base station, right? And there is beamforming involved, and you are in clear line of sight from that base station. In that case, alpha m can very well be less than alpha mu. Okay. Do you understand why this is true? Remember where this alpha came from and where why we had generalized it into alpha going from 2. Remember, it was we started with d to the minus 2, right? And this was true when we were having a omnidirectionally radiating element, and we were saying that if we look at a distance of d and we look at a very unit surface along that d, as d increases, the sphere grows I mean, the surface area of the sphere grows quadratically, and the energy you are receiving per unit surface area decreases at d to the minus 2. Do you remember this? I forgot about this thing.
Yes, sir, yes.
Yeah. So if you remember this, then we had generalized this into d to the minus alpha. That is okay. But this, if you are thinking about a let's say directional transmissions, which means your radiated energy is not omnidirectional anymore, which means you are focusing more energy towards this direction. So although your energy decreases or your surface area increases in terms of I mean distance square, it might well happen that if you are in very close proximity to the user and you are getting a clear line of sight, your path loss is actually worse for sub-6 gigahertz transmissions, precisely because not only it is transmitting in every direction, but also it is getting dispersed in a very weird manner as compared to very focused service of a millimeter wave. But we will not go into those details. We are neither going into the details of fields and waves, nor we are going into very close range transmissions where you go away from the far field pattern. Okay, so in part what you mentioned is quite true. What happened? Yeah, so in part what you mentioned is quite true. We will be focusing on the case where alpha m is greater than alpha mu, right? And even though alpha m is greater than alpha mu, that is not again enough to have this kind of argument, because gkm should also be greater than kmu, right? What does gkm greater than kmu mean? Remember that km is less than kmu. Do you agree with this point? Do you remember how these terms k were derived? Yes, no?
Sir, it's
That
something
lambda
4 pi by lambda.
lambda
Sorry?
by 4 pi d.
Yeah. So it was carrier wavelength divided by 4 pi some square, something like this, right? So k is directly proportional to the carrier wavelength, right? Carrier wavelength of millimeter wave is higher or sub-6 gigahertz is higher?
Sub-6 is
Right. So the sub-6 gigahertz is high. I mean, it's in the name, right? Millimeter wave is of the order of millimeters, whereas your RF transmissions, which is sub-6 gigahertz, is order of some centimeters, right? So since a carrier wavelength is larger for sub-6 gigahertz transmissions, k mu is larger, right? For the received signal power at the user. That means that the path loss constant is also very detrimental for millimeter wave. But that is precisely what you want to overcome with this term G, which means when would you assume, so in case alpha, I mean in your limiting case, when alpha m equal to alpha mu, which means whatever radiated power energy is going out of this antenna element, it is dissipating with distance in a similar manner, which means alpha m equal to alpha mu. When will you claim that the received power from both these bands is equal? When the antenna gain is large enough so as to compensate this whatever km was less than kmu, which means although km was less than kmu, you can multiply it with some g, which is your antenna gain, which compensates for this amount by which km was actually less than kmu, right? So this is the physical interpretation of this equation. It means that suppose your both these things are valid, which means your millimeter wave propagation is detrimental, which means alpha m is greater than alpha mu, which means with distance your millimeter wave transmissions suffer farther loss as compared to sub 6 gigahertz transmissions. The other part is also true, which means if the other part is also true, which means your antenna gain is high enough to compensate for the path loss constant that millimeter wave propagation brings as compared to the 6 sub 6 gigahertz. Then there exists a distance called this critical distance, within which if a base station is located, you would be getting a higher received power in millimeter wave. And in case your nearest base station is located outside this critical distance, you would be getting a higher sub 6 gigahertz power as compared to millimeter wave transmissions. It is thus not always true that a base station will either provide greater sub 6 gigahertz power or greater millimeter wave power. It depends on where exactly it is located. Is this convincing enough?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If this is convincing enough, I'll give you a couple of small exercises or examples, or numerical, not numerical, but numerical in the sense as Arnav was pointing out in the last class. I'll give you a couple of propositions to prove. Okay. The first one being, right, and the first part of it, I have already argumented and proven it. It says that if a base station is located within the critical distance, right, the user always chooses the millimeter wave band with RSSI based RAT selection. So this is something which I have already proven. Okay. The second part of it is an interesting thing, which says that if exactly one base station lies within the critical distance, millimeter wave association is also SINR optimal. Okay, what does this mean? It means that remember that all of these base stations operate in this dual band mode, which means for a user, connecting to a base station is not simply enough. You have to choose which band you should be using. So suppose you have connected to this base station and you are connecting it, I mean you are requesting millimeter wave services from it, which means suppose in the worst case all the other base stations are also transmitting to their users in millimeter wave, you would be experiencing interference from all of this. For the moment, do not worry about the directional transmission. We are considering only the worst case scenario, which means in the worst case all of these base stations are transmitting towards this user, which means all the interferences are in the worst case. In that case, the SINR is simply the signal power that you received from this direct link or the serving link. Let us look at it from this blue line, and all the interfering link are these red links, right? Now the question is, what is a strategy, what is an optimal strategy in terms of SINR, right? Because in case you connect in millimeter wave, the interference that you observe is in millimeter wave, and in case you connect to sub 6 gigahertz band, the interference that you observe from these other base stations are in sub 6 gigahertz band. Note that this is a bit different than the non-co-channel transmissions that I had discussed previously. In two-tier networks for non-co-channel transmissions, the base station locations were different. Here, the base station locations are exactly the same, regardless of which band you are using. Which means the location of the base stations remains exactly this, even if you use millimeter wave, and your serving base station is exactly here, and the interfering base stations are exactly there. And in case you are using sub 6 gigahertz transmissions, your distance to the serving base station is exactly the same, and all the interferers are exactly the same. So can you tell me, or can you prove that if exactly one base station lies within the critical distance, millimeter wave association is also SINR optimal?
Sir,
You,
if,
you can prove it in mathematical terms, but for the moment I'm looking at only argumentative terms.
sir,
Yeah.
in case of millimeter wave association, if there
Mm-hmm.
is only one base station within DC,
Mm-hmm.
then there is no interference. So it's best case scenario that way.
Sorry, I'm not able to listen. Can you speak again a bit?
I'm saying if there is only one base station within DC, then there
Mhm.
should not be any interference, right?
Why?
Because there is only one base station.
No, no. So remember that all the base stations are creating interference. So DC means what? DC is simply a distance within which, if a base station is present, it is providing a higher millimeter wave received power. It doesn't mean that this base station stops transmitting in millimeter wave. It's just true that if you consider this as base station 1 and base station 2, right? They are serving other users as well, by the way. Okay. So it simply means that if you consider only base station 1, from base station 1, this user receives a higher millimeter wave power as compared to a sub 6 gigahertz power from base station 1. And if you consider only base station 2 provides a higher sub 6 gigahertz power as compared to a millimeter wave power to this user. It doesn't mean that there are no other users. Suppose this is another user which is connected to base station 2. Now this guy connects to base station 1 and starts its service in millimeter wave. It will of course experience interference from this base station because it is still transmitting to other users, right? Is it clear, or
Yeah,
is this?
understood. I got it.
Yeah, this was the question, right? Okay. So, yeah. So, can you then give me some argumentative line of thought uh, to say which is your SINR optimal strategy?
So if I am taking my base station within that critical distance as my interferer,
Mm-hmm.
uh, then I would be like in terms of that SNR expression, I would just put a bigger power source in my denominator, so my SNR would reduce.
Mm-hmm. Your line of thinking is, I mean, absolutely correct.
Interferer is like numerator and smaller quantity is above and larger quantity is denominator, so overall it will reduce.
Exactly. So you have basically some term in the numerator, which is, let's call it S1, divided by some noise and interference, which is sum of Si. I goes from 2 to some n number of, suppose there are n number of base stations located inside your network. So S1, remember, exactly one base station is located inside the critical distance, which means millimeter wave power from S1. So let's compare these two things. S1 is in microwave or sub 6 gigahertz rad. Si, then all of the interference we have to consider in Si, in sub 6 gigahertz rad, and S1 in millimeter wave by N0 plus I goes from 2 to n SI in millimeter wave. Now we know that SIM is greater than SI mu because the nearest one is inside the critical distance, which means all of the receipt power from that guy in millimeter wave is higher than what we received from it in the sub 6 gigahertz rat, right? So let me I mean, for the ease of speaking, let me refer to sub 6 gigahertz rat as microwave. Okay. um, so millimeter wave received power is greater than the microwave received power in the within the critical distance from the nearest base station, and it is also true that Si mu is greater than Sim for all other base stations 2 to n, right? Because these guys are located outside the critical distance, and outside the critical distance, microwave received power is higher than the millimeter wave received power. Now, if you combine these two line of arguments, you can verify this result. Is it okay? Because this brings me to the third point, which was my objective to give you the exercise. This part is okay, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if this is okay, let's go back to this expression a bit. Okay. Suppose, so once a deployment has occurred, right, and you are connecting to a base station, and suppose there is enough functionality in the base station to control the radiated power, which means G is a parameter which a base station can control. It can control by either using some number of antenna elements, reducing or increasing them, or it can control by tuning its power amplifier, which means the radiated power from the base station is something which a base station can control. Which means if you look at this expression carefully, the critical distance is something a base station can control, right, based on tuning the G up and down, the antenna gain up and down, right? Which means if an operator wants to, let's say, prioritize millimeter wave communication, it can happen because a operator might want to offload all the users to millimeter wave rat because it has so much bandwidth present with it, and also it might want to provide only data services using the millimeter wave rat, while freeing up the sub 6 gigahertz rat for controlling and other type of services. In that case, it might happen that the user might not be connecting to the millimeter wave rat because it is giving maybe a less amount of received power, but a operator still wants to force that user into millimeter wave rat by tuning the G up, tuning the antenna gain up and down, and still ensure SINR optimality. Which means, suppose, when G increases, what happens? This critical distance increases, right? G increases means it's something like this. So these base stations nearby can coordinate in such a manner that during when a, let's say, an important user is getting serviced, they can use a certain value of G such that this critical distance lies exactly outside the nearest base station. Okay. In that case, two things happen. You ensure millimeter wave connectivity. The second thing that happens, that you ensure that millimeter wave connectivity is SINR optimal. Okay. This is a bit far-fetched notion because you cannot cater to these kind of requests for all of these users, and I am not going to discuss user profiles. I was going to discuss it a bit in detail while discussing network slicing, because when slicing comes into the picture, different classes of users and their services come into the picture, which means there would be different categories of users: platinum users, gold users, bronze users, something like this, and that would define what would be the type of service or type of experience a user gets into the network. For such important users, let's say quote unquote important users, such kind of mechanism can be facilitated, but that's not our point. Let's focus on the point where a network operator wants to do the same for all possible users without having to tune this antenna gain individually for each user. Okay. Which means, find out, so can you guys tell me what is the probability that there lies exactly one base station inside the critical distance? So what is the probability that there exists exactly one base station within the critical distance. Can anyone tell me? Yes,
The
come on.
that
This is from Poison Point Process. Yes.
1 minus e raised to the power lambda pi dc square.
Are you sure? What was this
Uh,
probability?
Sir,
White for
Yeah. So this is
yeah,
the
this is
probability that
at
there are
least
no base
one.
stations. And the
stations.
sorry, one at a time. So there is I mean, there is an obvious issue with this expression. This is an expression for the probability that there is at least one base station within the critical distance, right? Because the second part is the probability that there are no base stations, and one minus probability of no base stations is at least one base station. But what we want is exactly one base station. Yes,
Okay,
some
exactly one station. Yeah.
So Poisson is with k is equal to 1. I mean,
right.
e
So it
to
is
the
e to the minus lambda pi dc
square times
square times
pi lambda
lambda.
dc by 1 factorial. Yeah.
Yeah, only this, right? So this is the probability that only one base station is located at this thing, right? Note that this term is increasing with lambda and this term is decreasing with lambda, right? And it's obvious, right? I mean, if you increase too much, I mean, if you increase lambda too much, it might happen that within the critical distance, too many base stations have come in. And if you decrease lambda too much, it might happen that none of the base stations are present inside the critical distance. So there exists an optimal lambda, and I will, since there is, I mean, we are running out of time and we are already crossed the 5 o'clock mark. What I would ask you to do is do dp1 by d lambda, right? And make it equal to 0 to find some lambda c, which is a critical base station density, which means what? It means that if an operator has to have this strategy that it wants every user to prioritize millimeter wave association, and also meanwhile ensure that this millimeter wave association also maximizes the SINR, which means it is also SINR optimal. The best way, or one way to maximize the chances of this occurring is to deploy using lambda c. Okay, which means if you deploy, if a operator is deploying using lambda c, it maximizes the probability that for all user, or for a typical user, there is exactly one base station within its critical distance for a given fixed transmit antenna gain, or trans receive antenna gain product. This, by the way, this does not ensure that all the users will have only exactly one base station within the critical distance. It just says that this probability that such an occurrence appears is maximized. Is it clear? I mean, it should be a very straightforward thing to do. I can do it for you. It's e to the minus lambda pi dc square multiplied by pi dc square minus pi lambda dc square multiplied by e to the minus pi lambda dc square pi dc square, something like this, right? And if you equate it to 0, this stuff and also this stuff disappears, which means dc is simply 1 by lambda c is simply 1 by pi dc square, right? And if you convert dc in terms of the antenna gains and the path loss exponents, it would say that since all of these are constants, by the way, k, and g also, if it is fixed for a network, you can find out the exact density with which a operator should aim to deploy these base stations in order to maximize this probability. Is it clear? Yes,
Yes.
no? Okay.
Yes. Sir.
Okay, if this is clear, I'll not waste more of your time. I will upload the question paper. It's a very simple one. Unfortunately, I had put the due time as 5:30, so let me just modify it and give you a bit more time. Let me give you up till 6, okay? But it should not take more than half an hour, okay? So try to upload by 5:45 max. So let me assign it already. And while I assign it, let me discuss with you what it means. Okay, so let me present my screen. Okay, so don't go about looking into the question paper at this moment. Just listen to some of my instructions in case you are running. I mean, you will not run out of time. So just pay attention here at this moment. Okay, so the question consists of a one-dimensional deployment scenario where this guy is the base station or serving base station, and it is serving to some users like this located along the roads. And this is some system model that we will be starting to explore after the midsem. Okay. Unfortunately, they have decided that they will be operating in millimeter wave. That means all blockages like vehicles and trees such as this uh, account for blocked links within the base station and the user. Okay, couple of parameters. Base stations are homogeneous Poisson point processes with intensity lambda b. Blockages, by the way, base stations have a height of hb. Okay, blockages are independent homogeneous Poisson point processes phi v with intensity lambda v. So v for vehicle initially, but since blockage and base stations both are b, that's why I used v for the blockages. Height of these blockages are hv. What you can assume is hv is smaller than hb. Okay, this is something which is not present, but I'll tell you right away. So hv blockages are of smaller height than the base stations. So hv is less than hb. So couple of things that you have to address is we are looking only from the perspective of the typical user and its associated base stations. We have not gone into characterizing the interference and so on. Okay. So only the user, suppose it is located at a distance of d from its serving base station, you have to find out where a blockage, if a blockage is present, it will create a obstruction in that link. Note that since the blockage is of smaller height, if the blockage is very close to the base station, it will actually not create a blocking in this link, right? It's only within a certain distance x, if a blockage is located, it will create an obstruction in this signal. So express this x in terms of d, which is straightforward from your similar triangles. Using this, you have to prove that if a nearest base station is blocked, all the base stations on the same side as the nearest base station is blocked. Which means if a user, and this is the nearest base station, if a blockage is present such that this base station link is blocked, any other base station present on the left of this base station is blocked. At least them, they are blocked by the same blockages. They can be blocked by multiple blockages as well. These are very straightforward things, and that's why they have 0.5 marks. Then we go to the interesting part. It's the probability that a user observes a line of sight linked to the base station. A user observes a line of sight linked to the base station when there is no blockage present inside this link, right? But when we say probability, it means you have to take into account all possible such distances d and x. Remember, these are Poisson point processes, and thus d and x both are random variables, right? So out of all possible distances of the serving base station and the user, what is the probability that the user observes a line of sight link to this nearest base station? You can comment on this asymptotic behavior as the base station density goes to infinite, or the this is lambda, this should be lambda v, okay, or the vehicle density goes to infinite, okay, and give some inferences from this expression when the blockage and the base station heights are the same. That's the first interesting part. The second interesting part is assume that these base stations operate in millimeter wave band and the users receive negligible power in case of a non-line of sight state, which means only when you are receiving power from the line of sight state, you get any significant service. Conditional on the distance being equal to r, what is the SINR coverage probability of the typical user over the fast trading realizations, which means my distances are not changing. My distance is fixed at a location, right, which is D equal to R. What is the SINR coverage probability that this user is experiencing? So these are very straightforward questions. The second one probably would take you 10 minutes, but the rest three, A, B, and D, would take you 10 to 15 minutes combined. Okay, to try to upload it within 5:45.
Sir, for the last part, for the
Mhm.
Rayleigh distribution, we have to take some parameter h for that, right?
Sorry.
For the last part and the Rayleigh distribution, we have to assume some parameters for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's throughout our course, it's unit power Rayleigh distribution, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so in case there is some parameter missing or some parameter is unclear, again, use your best judgment. For example, if there is lambda s present somewhere, I think there is lambda s present, so just put it as lambda v, okay? I mean, obviously there is no lambda s business going on, I hope. Yeah, there is nothing like that. So just use those judgment on your end. And as similar to quiz 3, in case there is some question which is ill-formed or incomplete or something which is unsolvable, I mean, you will get the marks for it unless you do a obvious blunder. Okay. So I'll disconnect this for the moment, and probably we see each other during the mid-sem, and then continue our development of the millimeter wave network after the mid-sem. Okay. Thank you, guys.